kick off. It's 11:48. Thank you very much for coming along. This is the session on the opening session for the Learning Technologies track, and we're talking really about the big picture stuff in learning technologies, but also very much about the practical side of how you get a learning technology implementation to happen at a big scale. So all the normal issues around how you get learning technology buy-in, how you select systems, how you change from one system to the other, and so on. We've got a great panel who've been there and done it. I just want to quickly check with the technical side. We've got one slide up, which is super. Helga's from Hilti. Helga, do you have any slides?
Nope.
No slides?
No slides.
Okay, that's good. Lots of interaction. Tony's from Alliant. Tony, do you have any slides?
No.
Okay, no slides. Henry?
No slides.
We have no slides. We're going to have people actually talking with the audience, having a conversation, and we expect you to talk back and have lots of interaction. How does that sound? Yeah, all right, come on, sounds great. Good. All right. We have a series of presentations that take us through how you change from deciding you're going to move to a new system, a new way of learning using learning technologies, how you get people's buy-in, and you've got to roll out, and we have some award-winning technologies, how actually it can really have a great effect on your organization. So we'll kick off with Helga from Hilti Corporation. You may have heard of Hilti before. They're very, very proactive in their use of technologies to ensure the support of learning, and they're really geared towards its effect on performance. So,
Just intro, very good.
off to you.
I'm Helge Lippert. Helge means the Holy One. Lippert means lovely and hard in German, in Old German, basically. So holy, lovely, and hard sounds like a good combination to me. So I'm 46. I have a son, his name is Luke. And Luke is a very uncommon name in Germany.
Huh.
It would be normally Lukas. So obviously, he was born, and I googled his birth date. He was born on the red Skywalker day following the Maya calendar. So that tells you that I'm a Jedi Knight, I'm a Star Wars fan. So the Force is with us, we are safe, right? So we'll have a great time. Thank you. We do the introduction first, right?
Fantastic. Tony, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, I'm Tony White. I'm not going to disclose my age. GDPR, there's a right to know, and you don't need to know. So I am the Chief Learning Officer for Alliant, or the head of Alliant University is what we call it inside. So I've been with Alliant now for 5 years in 2 of their business units, one in the investment side of the business, and the second is now in the group headquarters in the insurance side of the business, in the mothership. Previously, I've worked with Coca-Cola in the UK for their bottling division, Coca-Cola European Partners, where I first met Don. And Laura, by the way, was when we were working with Towards Maturity back in the day. And then prior to that, spent 14 years with HP. I've worked with Motorola, I've worked with Gateway Computers. If you remember back to the Cowspot box, we were the manufacturing company back in Dublin in 1993. And prior to that, as you can tell that I don't have a German accent, I was in the British Army for 6.5 years. So, and by trade, I'm an engineer. So I've come from that lovely world of the technical and logical world now to that nice, soft, fluffy feeling of the HR world and learning and development, which isn't so soft and fluffy after all. So I'm going to open the kimono, as we say, and bare our Alliant soul to you in terms of the learning journey that we've been on for the last 5 years. So that's me.
We look forward to it, Tony. Okay, and Henrietta, is it Henrietta or Henry?
Henry.
Henry.
I'm going to remain seated because I'm 5 foot tall. I may not get back on the stool again. I've been working in digital learning since around 1998. I started on the supplier side with key accounts in the travel industry, public sector, and also the NHS. And then about 12 years ago, I moved to TUI, and starting with a blank sheet of paper, I've been driving the strategy forward there. I'm now the Learning Solutions Manager, so my responsibility is essentially coming up with technical solutions to complex learning needs. My team have a focus on a head office environment and training that's going to be delivered out across the group. And we also provide guidance to digital teams that are delivering content to the operational areas. As well as that, we look at the strategy of digital learning at TUI moving forward. And not only looking at the strategy, it's also our responsibility to jump in feet first and make sure that that happens and happens successfully. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. All right, so we've got an interesting panel here with plenty of experience in the field and outside it. Jedi Knight, Helga, do you want to step forward and take us through your story?
Of course. Thanks, sir. Right, so I will talk the next couple of minutes about the decision to implement a new HR system and new IMS, and then up to the implementation, and I think then colleagues will go on from there, from their experience. So I will skywalk. I will create the clouds in the sky and talk about our expectations and the road so far. However, our goal always is in Hilti that every person after the meeting is a bit more happier, more intelligent than before. So, a little interaction here. Can you please do 2 fists as I do it? 1 finger up, 1 thumb up. And then switch.
What?
It always takes 3 seconds and somebody starts laughing. Why do you laugh? Why did you laugh? Yeah?
Yeah, it's not that easy.
It looked that easy. And it didn't work in the first time, right? The good thing is, if I tell you, if you do that for the next 2 to 3 minutes, very slowly and then faster and faster, you can see I did that a couple of times in my life, you will create the neural connection in your brain, and you will be more intelligent. So, job done, yeah? Task already achieved.
I'm still working on it.
So, the question is, how could now a technology support you in this exercise? I did this with my son, Luke, on the weekend. I asked him, can you do this? And of course he couldn't, because you do it for the first time. It's impossible, because you are not trained to do that. And he really liked it. He said, okay, we did other exercises as well, like with these movements and so. And then he was like, I asked him, so what do you need to do it, to learn it? And he said, I think just time, Papa, but can I have a look on YouTube before? He's 8 years old, by the way, yeah? YouTube is his main source of information, that's for sure. And I hardly fighting to get that time down. But it took me anything to engage him. When I ask you how engaged you are or how engaged your employees are, last year I was in Corsica on vacation, 2 fantastic weeks, walking barefoot for 2 weeks. And then Saturday, I had to go back on Monday to work. On Saturday I said to my wife, I'm so looking forward to Monday when I can go back to work. And you know the moment when your wife looks at you and you recognize you just made a big mistake. I said, oh, you didn't like the vacation? I said, no, I'm just so happy to go back to work because it doesn't feel like work at all. Our engagement score in Hilti is around 75%, so 3 out of 4 employees are really engaged. It's good, but it's not best in class. And of course, we are always trying to get on best in class levels. So we asked our most experienced and engaged employees, what do we have to do to get this, towards 100? What do you think they said? How can they increase engagement in a construction company, power tool company, or in any company? Any thoughts? Do not worry about it. Okay, yeah? Do we? That's true. 2/3 of our employees are in direct sales contact with the customer. True, absolutely. So it's really hard sometimes because you're the lonely knight in your red car. Driving with all the power tools to the construction, you're alone quite often. And how can I engage them even more, right? Because there are not so many interaction possibilities with them. So we asked them, and they said, actually, when my manager talks to me, it feels like a scheduled conversation. I get talked to, and I don't really have the feeling that I get listened to. Okay, that was one of the biggest, that came up quite often. And when I have a development discussion, he always focuses on my weaknesses instead of my strengths. That's not such a convenient discussion as well. Makes sense, right? We much more enjoy talking about our strengths. And then, the system that we have here, we have to put in 16 fields and everything, and it's always the Hilti view. This is what you want me to do, but it's never my view. Maybe I would like to do some things differently than you tell us. So that was around 1.5 years ago. 1 year ago, we had a panel speaker, Marcus Buckingham, who is very much into strength-based and all of this as well. And then the board made a decision and said, okay, let's address that topic. But that means not only buying a new software system, new IMS, it means a mindset shift for all our employees. Now, this is getting a bit more complicated right now. We have 30,000 people in over 120 countries of the world, and I'm in Schaan, in the headquarters in Liechtenstein. I'm the head of learning development for the headquarters, around 2,000 people there. I was, okay, what do we do now? So we had a look, benchmarked the best-in-class solutions, and figured out that we have to be much more about the person. We have to much more personalize the whole thing. So we're turning the switch in January. So far, we are in the last pilot phase in training all people. And what we learned was really, it is about my contribution, about my personal contribution I can bring to the company, and how this connects then to the bigger goals. So what we did is really increasing the amount of feedback, have more frequent discussions, have it more on an agile level. It's not about annual goals anymore. It's much shorter timeframes, can be weeks, can be days that you can put goals in. You can change goals. Hopefully not the overall amount of target you want to achieve with your sales, but you could. And you should focus always on the things you're good at. So one matrix in your own contribution is really about what do I enjoy doing and what am I good at? And we wrote for every role profile, we wrote the 10 things to be good at. So for your current role and maybe for your future role as well. So you know exactly on these 10 things, what is it we are focusing on? The new thing as well is that we have much more frequent feedback, and you can give, after every interaction, basically feedback to the people of your team, your colleagues, to everybody, to the CEO if you want, when he did a speech in the new system. And of course, this frequent exchange gives you much more clarity because it includes not only the what you did, but how was your behavior doing it. So that was new, that we included the behavior of changing as well. And this behavior is very much linked to our values. We have 4 core values, which is integrity, so we walk the talk, right? We really say what we do. We have courage, we challenge the status quo. We are teamwork oriented, we party the success, we support each other, and we are committed to do the extra mile for the customer, for my own development, and for the development of my colleagues. And if we don't see that you address in your behavior these 4 core values, you might have a hard time and will not much progress, which is fine when you are happy in the way with the job you're doing right now. But this is really something we have to see. And of course now, doing this behavior change with all 30,000 employees is a big challenge. So what we did was we developed 2 every role profile of 95% of the population we have so far, because we have 2 more months to go, 1.5. We developed the personas and matched them against all of this. So we started working as learning development team, 6 FTEs, 6 people only doing this, around 7 months ago. But of course, the whole project team is much bigger. And we involved, I was the one lucky enough writing the 10 things to be good at for general managers and senior management. So my buddies, my sparrings partners have been the CEO of Central Europe and the CEO of Asia. So I wrote what I thought a good GM should do, and then they challenged me and gave feedback, which is always nice to get challenged by 2 CEOs, as working in the learning development department, and your boss is always in CC, always good. And then we built the 10 things you have to be good at. And of course, because I know we are a global company and every part of the world is different, we are the same but different, right? You never heard that before. You can change one or two things, but at least we have created the construct on a global level that everybody can start with. So from that on, we started flying out to our hubs, to our MOs, so the countries we're working in, and trained the human resource and senior leadership team. What is it? How do I have to have these frequent conversations? How can I use the system? And we had 2 pilot countries doing that a bit longer already, where we agreed on different target setting, which was in Eastern Europe, that was Poland and Romania. And they did exceptionally well, I have to say, pretty well in the implementation of these more team-oriented targets, using my contribution from every single person. So from there on, now we're training all the trainers, and we will have a freeze period from January till 1st of March. 2nd March, the new system will go live. So in that meantime, we are getting, hopefully, everything up and running for the 30,000 employees. And we see how it goes. So far, it's looking good. We're doing the Skywalk, as I said, we're walking in the clouds. And we really have strength-based discussions. So from the potential discussion, we have as well a different matrix that we had previously. There are 2 axes. It's my potential and my contribution. So how strongly did you contribute to the company's success? And how is your potential? Either do you stay in the role, do you move, or do you go up? So it should then, as you can map the whole team on one matrix, simplify the world, and we are very much looking forward to that. I'm pretty sure my colleagues will put me back to the ground. So far, it's looking pretty good. And as a Jedi Knight, we're always looking forward and believe in the Force. So let's see how it goes. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hang on, just 1 second. Now, look, in the Star Wars movies, the Jedi Knights always have this sense, don't they, about
Yes.
that something's going to happen before it actually happens. It's like
Yes.
it's like a spider sense. You're going to turn the key on this in January. You're going to have 2 months downtime. Then you're actually going to launch it across the company in March.
Yeah.
Does your Jedi sense foresee any issues coming down the track?
Looking to the future. Well, the best preparation for the future is the present.
Yeah.
So this is why the overall project is called Moment. We stay in the moment
Right.
to really have more engaged people. There will be, of course, ups and downs, but as this is so grounded in our culture, we have a caring and performance culture. So the only thing you have to do as a leader in Hilti is to develop your people. That's the only thing you have to do. That's the only goal you get from senior management. And as it's so deep in our culture, it's the fundament of all our strategy, of all our beliefs, of all our values, I believe we will master that, and at the end, the good side will win, yeah.
Fantastic. Helga, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll be taking more questions for the whole panel at the end, because I think we need to build this picture of what it's like to go through the preparation phase, change things around, and then deploy and get value. So we're going to pass over to Tony White from Alliant to get his view of what he's been doing with his systems. Is it all as rosy as Helga has pointed and described?
If I take my jacket off, Don, I could show you the scars on my back. So no. For those of you who are not based in Germany, it becomes a little bit more complex, I feel. You know, I've worked with the French unions, but I've never worked in an environment where the Workers' Council have had so much power within an organization. Mm-hmm. And trying to understand and gain their buy-in to whatever projects that you're working on from a learning perspective has been an absolute challenge for us. So the journey that we in Allianz have been on, so let me go back 3 years to, we call it the Allianz U. So we started this journey. Allianz is a 129-year-old insurance company, and please don't beat us up too much. It's one of those necessary evils in life. You have to pay your premiums, and you hate having to pay your premiums, but if anything goes wrong, you love having the security of having that insurance provider behind you. So it's not exactly the sexiest thing that everybody's going to be looking at to say, I'm going to rush out and buy your product, Tony. However, we've been very successful, and we have developed our business model over time. We have an asset management organization as well as an insurance arm. Allianz has traditionally worked as a country-based model, a federated structure. So for the past 126 years, the desire or the HR function, learning functions, have all operated independently in every country. So we have 144,000 employees sat in approximately 63 countries, working in 70 different operating entities. Every one of those entities could go out and buy their own learning technology. Every one of those could buy their own HR system. Everyone could go and do basically whatever they wanted because the profit and loss was controlled at a local level. And therefore, if you're a profitable business, then how dare you at a group level come and tell me that I need to implement your system when I have a perfectly functioning one here locally? So we've had to try and break this mindset. We started on this thing of, we call it the HR transformation, and it gets shortened down to HRT, which I think is a very bad three-letter analogy. However, it stuck. So we've been on our HR transformation for the last three and a half years. And the backbone of that was to implement a global employee central system, learning management system, talent management, and all the other lovely systems that go along with it, and try and provide a global single operating system for us. Now, that gets you so far. We are still in the process of that implementation. So the challenge that we have is that we have a lovely culture in Allianz, which is we try and include everybody. But if you include everybody, then everybody has an opinion. And as we know, opinions are like a certain part of the anatomy. Everybody has one. So we have made some errors along the way, which is basically we have, well, I think they're errors, others would disagree, which is every country that we've gone into to implement our system has then had the right to customize that system to a certain degree. So we're going to end up with a system that doesn't resemble what it was originally intended to do because we've got all these different tweaks that have been added to it. So when the global provider of our backbone then updates the thing, is the thing going to work? Probably not. Janina Kugel, who is the CHRO of Siemens, recently did a talk for us in Allianz, and she said, the fundamental mistake we made was we Siemensized all of the systems when we implemented them. And she said the mistake that we made, we learned from, and the next iteration of the implementation, they said, we're taking the out-of-the-box solution. And if you need to do anything else, you can take it out of the system. I think that's a real learning for people is don't customize what already works. You know, you can make every excuse that you want that there's a legal or regulatory or fiscal issue for you to customize that system. There's not really, because the system will do what it's asked to do. You can do what you need to do outside of that construct and use the system to let the system do what it does. So part of our challenge as a legacy business, very quantitative audience, is to engage the learner. So we knew by implementing a learning management system, it's not exactly the sexiest thing that you're ever going to implement as a learning and development professional. In fact, it's probably not the best employee experience that you want for your learners or employees to have. So what are you going to do? So you've got to put some wraparounds on these things. So we've got to do career development days. You've got to do these different workshops to try and engage the employee. And I always recall back to a portfolio manager challenging me saying, this is all well and good, Tony. These are great systems that you're implementing, but I don't have the time to learn. I only have 3 minutes a week. I went, Well, the research says that's actually wrong. You've got about 1% of your time, so it equates to about 16 minutes for you. And you could see the challenge was there, and the fury was just starting to build in his eyes. And I said, well, if you were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, would Allianz still work? Yeah. If you go to lunch today and take an hour for your lunch, will Allianz still work? Yeah. So why have we got this narcissistic feeling when we're sat at our workstation that we don't have time to learn? There's an excuse that we don't have time to learn because everything that we do is learning. As Josh Burstyn calls it, learning in the flow of work. Work is learning, learning is work. And how do we make that sort of natural tendency where people see their activities on a day-to-day basis as an opportunity to learn? Unfortunately, we have this sort of halo effect, which is, I feel, a bit like heroin. And the heroin is the classroom. And the learning and development team now have to be the methadone for heroin, which is how do we wean our organization off this addiction to classroom-based learning, where people think that by putting somebody into a four-box wall with seats in it and behind a desk and somebody pontificating at the front means that they're learning. It's bullshit. And Audrey sort of debunked some of the myths that we talk about as well from much of the validation or the reasons that we use to try and build our learning cases. So we have to think about things differently. So one of the things we did in Allianz was we said, okay, we've got the LMS, we've got our structured classroom. What could we do to implement, or what system could we implement to try and shift this learning culture? So we chose LinkedIn Learning. And some of you may look at me and go, LinkedIn Learning, why would you choose LinkedIn Learning? Well, we felt it had the best content library, best relevance, it was easy to engage with, and the platform was knowable and we could see the benefits. Now, challenge number one. LinkedIn Learning, as a DAX 30 listed company, if any of you know how difficult it is when you talk about data control in Germany, LinkedIn Learning's data centers are in the US and in Singapore. That doesn't go down very well with your information security officer when you try and do your data privacy testing, all the contracts that you have to draw up. So the first challenge is, how do you get past that? So we had to write a risk acceptance waiver. Our CHRO wrote the risk acceptance waiver. Eventually we got through it all, through the Betriebsrat, through the works councils. In fact, they wanted it. At the end, they saw the value that this was about creating an opportunity for all employees to learn rather than just the chosen few. And part of the challenge that we have is that anytime we try and do anything with non-executives in the organization, we have to go to the Works Council and negotiate what it is. Every year we have to bring the training catalogs to them. Every year we have to get their approval that these are the things that we're going to do. With this, we were just doing this once off, and then anybody can go and learn anything. And that was really the vision that we had behind Allianz U, which was to create this democracy of learning, to democratize learning in Allianz, where everything was available to everyone whenever they needed it. And LinkedIn Learning was that first foray. So we went live 2 years ago, and we've been wildly successful. We have 52,000 registered users on the platform, 44,000 of which are now active users. That means they visit the platform at least once a month. How did we get there? There's a long story. I could spend hours telling you what we've done. Some of the things that we've done is we've tried to associate learning with corporate and social responsibility. So one of our operating entities came up with the idea that they would run a learning month. And during that learning month, for every hour of learning consumed on the LinkedIn platform, they would make a donation of euros to a social responsible charity, one local, one global. We saw a spike because people started saying, well, by me going and learning something on a platform, people are getting engaged and there's an outcome for it. So we had people, we saw a spike of 10,000 hours in 1 month on the LinkedIn Learning platform from this entity, which meant that the charities that we had chosen benefited by this. Since then, Allianz Ireland, one of the smaller entities in the worldwide care business, has since gone on and replicated that and done it for a local school. When we give people purpose and meaning for what they're learning and there's an outcome for it, they were more engaged with it. Now, the first report that I ever produced for the CEO, which showed the statistics, showed the #1 course on LinkedIn Learning was Body Language for Leaders. Can you imagine the response? What the hell are you doing, Tony? Body language for leaders? But we wanted data scientists, we wanted, digital, and we wanted agile, and we wanted all these other skills to be built. That was the purpose of putting this platform in place. And you're telling me body language for leaders is the #1. Holy shit, what am I going to do now? Next month comes, same thing happens again. It's still the #1 program. It turns out that LinkedIn have an algorithm that when it starts suggesting things, that body language for leaders was the #1 program. Switch the friggin' thing off. So we couldn't change it. So we had to do something. So what we did was we looked at our strategic workforce plan. What are the skills of the future our business want and need? And we created learning paths in there that would align to those future skills that we thought the organization's going to need. 3rd month in, we started to see the shift. To Agile, Scrum, project management, data analytics, data science related subjects. We started to see the shift. Now, if you look at the analytics, We've done 2.4 million hours of learning in the past 2 years on the LinkedIn Learning platform. That's a lot of learning through that platform. We're the #1 customer in Germany. I think we're the #1 customer now worldwide on the LinkedIn Learning platform, and it's had a huge impact for us. Now, the challenge I have now is that everybody thinks that when Tony turns up to do a presentation, the answer is LinkedIn Learning, what's the question? And that's not the case. It is just one vehicle, it's just one set of content that we've used that has helped shift our learning culture. So now we're at the point where 60% of all the content that's consumed on that platform by our learners, there's no such thing as learners, that are by our employees, 60% of that content is related to the strategic workforce planning skills of the future. Agile, data, project management. So we've seen the shift. We've seen that people are taking time out now and using different methodologies to try and engage with these platforms. The next step in our journey is we're just going live with the Degree platform because we wanted to use it as a content aggregation tool so that we can see the LinkedIn Learning content, edX, and all the different platforms in one-stop shop so that Alliant U truly becomes that one-stop shop for all learning in our organization. So it means that the learning management system in the operating entity that I talked about at the beginning of my talk is now redundant because it's all fed through one central system where people can find whatever it is when they need it from whatever source. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of the journey that we've been on, some of the challenges that we've had. We're still not there. Absolutely still not there. But we've got a shift now in momentum in terms of where we're going and the direction, and there's a belief now that what we're doing is the right thing. When we started, there was a lot of skepticism. I think we now see we've got a lot of belief.
Brilliant. Tony, thank you very much. I am, of course, scanning Twitter, and if you've got any questions, throw them up. We will be putting hands up at the end of when everybody's talked to get questions. But one from David Swaddle in the audience. Question for Tony. If listening to a sage on the stage isn't an effective way of doing learning, how is it different to listening to a sage on the screen instead? So what makes online better than a classroom delivered course?
Yeah, I'm in control.
The person who's learning. Yeah.
I'm in now control of what do I want to learn? What do I want to hear? So the stage on the stage, you don't know. You think what you're going to be told. So you go to we have a lovely class called Influencing Others Without Authority. It seems to be one of our most popular classes. What are you going to learn? You're going to learn influence. But do you know what's going to happen? Whereas when I go to the online, I can look at the transcript, I can look at what they're going to say, there's a prediction that I can say, I can look at the facts before I take that. So I can see whether it's going to be worth my while. So 2 days in the classroom of trying to learn influencing skills, we've got this sort of hope strategy that we're going to learn something from it, if you go in there with the open mind. Whereas when I've got control, when I can go onto the digital platform, I can then choose that content. I can start watching it and say, no, that's not relevant. I can move to the next. And then I find what is relevant for me. So I think that's the difference is we're giving the employee or the user the control rather than us,
dictating
the teacher, the control.
Right, fine. I'm sure that we could explore that in a lot more detail and perhaps more questions will come. But for the moment, Tony, thank you very much.
Thank
Henry,
you.
over to you. You go right with the getting down. Fantastic. Well done.
I'm just going to talk to you today about two programs that we've implemented that started with conferences. And both of them use artificial intelligence. The first project I'm going to talk about is travel geography, which was delivered to our UK and I apprentices in the retail estate. This was originally delivered face-to-face by assessors, but their time needed to be diverted. We were going to have to deliver it digitally. And the first time we had the opportunity to look at the training notes and decide how we would deliver it digitally was when I had my greatest shock. We were looking at 140 modules of learning. But because of external delays outside of our control, we had 8 weeks to deliver the 140 modules. No matter how I looked at it, we weren't going to be able to achieve it in-house. It was going to take around 8 months. So we spoke to external suppliers that delivered training using traditional digital learning methods. Love saying that phrase. And they weren't going to be able to bring the timescales in, and the costs for delivery were prohibitive. At a conference earlier in the year, I'd seen a presentation of a tool that uses artificial intelligence. It analyzes source content, like the assessor's training notes, and when it analyzes it, it decides on the design, it scripts it, it builds it, and it delivers it. And what's more, it does this incredibly quickly. I saw this as our only solution. So I provided the training notes to the supplier, and they were not lying when they said quickly. We received our first 2 modules 2 days after we delivered that content to them. And then the AI delivered us 2 or more modules a day. Now, we'd started testing this solution in the same way that we would with any external build. We just couldn't keep up. We were going to have to work differently. We were going to need an agile approach to both the testing and the project management. The key change we made here was taking the pre-function phase, where we looked at the content, and the technical phase, where we looked at the technical delivery. We were going to need to bring those both together and do them at the same time. And we started to get back on track with very long hours. The other thing that we needed to do rapidly was to bring the learners on board. This was a very, very different way for our learners to learn. These were people that weren't used to studying alone, managing their own development. They were used to being trained face-to-face with an assessor, sometimes on a one-to-one basis. So we set up user groups from the learners, and we brought them on the journey with us. Actually, we were really lucky. They loved the solution. The design that the AI had come up with was very simple but extremely effective. First of all, the learners provided with core knowledge to read. This knowledge is then reinforced by a range of different questioning techniques that also check understanding. Then finally, the learners provided with detailed, personalized feedback, letting them know what they need to go through again. And this is repeated until the learner is fully competent. The reason they loved this approach was they could see they had 140 modules of learning to get through. And this felt like a really efficient way for them to get that knowledge transfer. They also loved the fact that this was training that was being delivered to them in a completely new way. And it was using artificial intelligence. So that message went back to the learners and got them on board, and they were really excited about it. In the end, we didn't deliver this program in 8 weeks. We actually delivered it in 6 weeks. And costs for development were 8 times lower than if we'd gone for a more traditional digital approach. About a month after delivery, we did
Sorry, Henry, can I just check? You're saying it's that much cheaper than not a classroom training, but that much cheaper than a traditional e-learning?
Digital piece of e-learning,
okay.
Yeah. About a month later, we did a survey. 95% of the learners rated our design approach as good or very good. Based on the success of that, we made a decision to move beyond the apprentices and make it available to the whole of our UK and Ireland retail estate on a voluntary basis. That's about 6,500 employees. And in just over a year, we'd had over 6,000 voluntary completions on this piece of training. It's been a really successful project. So the second project I'm going to quickly take you through also uses AI, but in a very different way, and it's for a very different audience. The second audience were our leaders in a head office environment. We had some fantastic content, I say modestly, available to our leaders on our learning management system. But the route to this content was clunky. You had to make your way through an HR system, and then when you got to the LMS, it could be difficult to find the right thing. Our leaders don't set time aside to learn, they learn in the workflow. And as a result of this, they were circumnavigating the LMS, and they were going to Google. And this was causing us issues. They were getting the answers and the approaches to fill the skill gaps that they had, but they were all learning in different ways. We needed them to be learning a cohesive way of working, the TUI way of working, so that when projects started, everybody was working consistently and quickly. The other issue that we had was that they were only filling the skill gaps that they were aware of. They had other skill gaps, they just weren't aware of them. And as a result of that, they weren't reaching their potential. At a conference, I'd been watching a discussion about whether chatbots could provide a learning experience. And I saw this as the only way that we could get around this problem. We could replicate that Google experience that people obviously liked. We could direct them to pre-filtered, high-quality content covering the TUI way of working. And if we mapped that content, then, based on that original search criteria, we could recommend further learning, helping people identify and fill skill gaps. So we found a supplier, and the next thing we needed to do was to think about what content we were going to include. So my team locked themselves in a dark room with the business strategy and about 500 post-it notes. I kid not. We went through the strategy in detail, identifying every piece of knowledge that you would need to successfully achieve the objectives of the strategy. Each of those were written on a post-it note and stuck to the wall. We filled the room. Once we'd done that, we needed to think about the mapping. So, for example, if somebody asked about performance reviews, the chatbot would give them that information, but also suggest training on objective setting and writing a business strategy. Once we'd completed the mapping, we needed to think about content. We needed a piece of content for every piece of knowledge. We were either going to curate it or create it. We didn't really mind where that content was going to be. It could be on the learning management system, it could be on the intranet, or indeed it could be on the internet. What was important was it was high quality and it matched the TUI way of working. And then the final thing we did was script the voice of the chatbot. All of this was passed to the supplier, and they were going to build it so we could trial it and get feedback. Whilst they were doing that build, we started our implementation plan. We opened conversations with the HR community, telling them what we were delivering, why we were delivering it, what the benefit was to the individual, what the benefit was to the business, so that when they were having their ongoing conversations with the business, they could start to introduce this concept to them. We also came up with the name of the chatbot, Otto, and a logo, which we started to place strategically around the business to get people sort of thinking about what on earth Otto was about. When we were ready to push forward with the trial, we sent it out to around 100 learners, giving them a month to give us feedback. It was really exciting. They loved it. In fact, they loved it so much that they started to email it out to other colleagues so that they could have a play and have a go. And our trial size at least doubled in size over that month. And we got some fantastic feedback, which we passed to the supplier so they could then move on to the build of the full chatbot. And whilst we were doing that, we continued with our implementation. We sent out targeted emails to the people that were going to be in the audience, letting them know what was coming, when it was coming, what it was going to do to support them on a daily basis. We put notices up on electronic notice boards we've got around the office. And on the day we were ready to launch, we set up essentially an exhibition stand like the ones outside. And we were there all day, introducing people to Otto, giving them a chance to have a go with it, ask us questions, and give us feedback on how we could improve it moving forward. People engaged with Otto really, really quickly. And we couldn't track all of the information on the chat, because some of it went to the internet. But where we could track traffic directed by Otto, we noticed a 33% increase in traffic in just the first 2 months. After a month, we did a survey. We love a survey. And 73% of the learners said that Otto had already met their learning need. And the stat we're most excited about, only 2% of our learners said their time would have been better spent if they'd gone to Google, which was a fantastic result for us. We continue to work on Otto, and we've already added more content, and we've got some great ideas for him next year. So 2 projects, both of which started with conferences. So hopefully you find something as useful as I did.
Thank you very much. Henry, thank you. You omitted one thing about both those projects.
I did what?
You omitted one thing about both of those projects. Do you want to share with us how they've been recognised?
Well, the first project, we won the Learning Technologies Award for Innovation last year in partnership with Donald. And last night, the second project won the Most Innovative New Learning Technologies Project Gold Award at Learning Technologies. So.
Okay, brilliant. So they are genuinely innovative projects. I do chair the Learning Technologies Conference. I have nothing to do with the awards. I have no sway. So, Henry, I'd love to claim all the credit for it, but it was entirely down to you.
I did threaten I wouldn't talk today if we didn't win.
So, right, I've got a whole lot of questions here which I've written myself and which I've got from the audience as well. But does anybody have a question? Thank you very much, Henry. Anybody got a question they'd like to throw up straight away to any member of the panel immediately? Okay, it's a bad time to brush your hair. Yeah, go ahead. Regarding platforms? Yeah. Yes. Sure.
In Alliance, how do you look at that? And is our attention fixated on this platform and engagement?
It's a great question, and it's one we should always be asking. How do we measure success? Helge, do you want to talk about how Hilti measures some of its success? Because I know you do track quite closely the impact of learning programs on the work. And then Tony, Henry, please.
Of course, yeah. I mean, of course, we always ask for the feedback of all the participants. However, with this one, we're turning the switch in January, so I can tell you next year exactly how it went. We have some matrices developed, which will go in the system as well. Of course, the key thing, and this is rounding the story full circle now, is really how does it impact the engagement score of our people? This is the core measure we are focusing on, and of course, this is broken down further, but this is the number everybody looks at. Right? Does our engagement score with our employees goes up? Because that will, as an effect, increase the engagement score with our customers, employees engage customers, and this is then, of course, the ultimate goal we're looking for, to steadily increase the engagement. So that's the core measure we're looking in. But next year, I can tell you the full story then.
Engagement's often used as a proxy for all sorts of things because it's been shown that it does lead to other benefits. I have also seen some great statistics with Hilti showing that from the training programs that you've done, you've increased or you've reduced time to competence substantially for people working in the field, particularly in the sales side, and that's led to directly, I'm not going to say causation, there's a correlation then with increased sales. So there's a fairly strong history there of measurement.
Exactly. When we separate, so we redone our sales training in Hilti. Instead of a 4-week program, we separated for smaller sprints, like 1 week, and it is over a time span of 4 months now. And it's much more coaching-based learning. So you always have to, you will never get an answer from a trainer. The trainer will always ask you back. Of course, when you get frustrated and you ask 3-4 times, you get an answer. But nevertheless, the trainer will always ask, okay, how could you find the information? Where could you do that? Because when you're later alone in your red car, nobody will give you the answer as well. So you should have made the connection where to find that. And this is what we train right from the beginning, and it reduced the time to perform. So in the first 6 months, we can, of course, measure what the sales revenue is that the people bring in. It reduced it dramatically. And what we saw, which was great, our most strategic products, which takes, like solution selling, which takes not only one power tool, but a whole fleet, or much broader, like a software solution from OnTrack, where we track all devices that you have in your company. That takes much more for the customer to get to that yes. Mm-hmm. This increased dramatically in the first 6 months. So people go much more into this, I ask you questions, customers, I really want to understand your business, instead of coming with the red box, putting it on your table and saying, this is the best machine you can buy, please buy it. So we are really moving to the solution selling, definitely. Yeah.
And able to track the benefits of the training through to that solution selling
Exactly.
through to end results.
So,
Perfect.
yeah, we did some research on this. Yeah.
Quickly then, Tony, Henry, are we just tracking activity with no impact?
Yeah, yes, as the Germans would say, jein. So I think we're at a real paradox situation on with data, which is we sit in an organization now with so much data telling us about things. And I'm mindful of, I think it was Kelly Palmer, the former CLO of LinkedIn, that's just completed a book, talked about this concept, which is if we interrogate data, it will confess to whatever you want. And I think one of the challenges that we have as in HR and in our world, the learning world, is what's the data we're interrogating to solicit what confession? So I can ask it that question and keep asking that question. Eventually it will tell me the answer I want to hear, which is, oh yes, it's had an impact. Is that what we really want? I'm not so sure. Yeah, we need to try and provide business justification for whatever it is that we do, but do we really?
Well, isn't there some metric? I mean, there's got to be a better metric than, yes, we trained 5,000 hours this month.
Absolutely, and NPS is another one that everybody seems to be using at the moment, which, in my opinion, is a BS metric.
This is net promoter score.
Net promoter score. Everybody's seems to be very trending on NPS, and it's BS, you know. And I can show you why, because we ran a program of leadership development in Munich in late September. And if you know what happens in late September in Munich, there's a very large festival. And we took the participants to the festival. Guess what? 100% NPS. Yeah? Did they learn any more? No. So I think we've got to be really selective of what we're trying to measure. So I think it's down to, you know, are you seeing people progress within your organization? Are they changing jobs? What are the internal sort of...
I think that's quite a persuasive argument, that actually what we should be looking for is the business drivers, which may have a number on or may not. The number may be as vague as, well, people are progressing. And that's an output, but it's very difficult to quantify and very difficult to correlate. Yes. Henry?
I think we have a lot of compliance in the travel industry. I can see a place for tracking there. Outside of that, in 20 years, as an L&D professional, nobody's ever asked me for a report on how many people have done training on objective setting. So why track it? So with the chatbot, for example, it's an invisible LMS, but you can't track everything it takes you to. Yes, if it's on the LMS, you can track it, but if it takes you to something that's great on the internet, we'll never know you've been there. And actually, I reiterate what Tony says here. What's important is whether you see the changes of behavior in the business, whether you see the benefits there. Tracking, for me, is something that helps me keep my job from one year to the next, over and above anything else.
So I think the answer is yes, the platform is one thing, but the solution and the result is another. You had a question, Donald? So SCORM is the traditional way of managing data in learning management systems, and it's got a quite limited data set.
I don't have that statistic with me, Donald, and I can't remember it. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Well, you'll never get the data by itself from the LMS, but if you are able to correlate, have other systems and pool the data, so you have the LMS data and the sales data, you can do it.
I have actually gone through my mental filing cabinet. Thank you. 63% of our learners with the first project, the travel geography, identified a specific sale that they'd made in the first month based on the knowledge that they'd picked up from that piece of training.
I like that because that's a combination of qualitative and quantitative. You're asking them for it, and it's a change in behavior, which we all want. we don't need to go any further than that into an ROI statistic, but it's clearly very powerful. 63%. It's brilliant.
Don't do that again.
Okay. Any other questions for the panel here? Yes, you have to shout it out, if you wouldn't mind. Or can we run a microphone over? Brilliant, thank you.
I had a question for Allianz, for Tony, about the when it comes to the scattered environment that you described before in all the regional, and how is that balance of pushing from Munich headquarters, these are the tools, but then definitely you have to keep it open for people to be creative, which is also very important, because I actually have the exactly same challenge right now, and I just got across a supplier out there who said, yeah, you're actually buying us. And I said, oh, okay, cool. So, I mean, and this is an overall challenge, I think so. And I guess that, I don't know, what's your take on that?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you deal with a very distributed organization? And
yeah, but, and after all, with the tools and all of that you have, and how you kind of, you govern it, or you just let it go, or...
how much central control can and should you have? Because you do need some local variation, probably.
I think this is one of those other paradoxes that I love to talk about, which is you have to lose control to get control. So I think 3 years ago when we started the journey, everybody at the regions and the federated structure was expecting us to come in with this sort of iron fist and say, and you shall do this, and this is the way it shall be. And in fact, it was the opposite, which is, okay, so what's the value in this community coming together and working together? And it was really alien. So I recall my first global call with the group, and there were 6 people on the call. Yeah. And the learning organization in Allianz at that stage was around about 350 people that had a title of something to do with learning and development. Now when we run the call, we have to run it twice. We have to run it once in the morning for Europe and Asia, and then in the afternoon for Europe and the US. And we have around about, on average, 200 plus people coming to that. And it's a non-mandatory call. It's a completely voluntary thing. So by letting them do and creating that as a community and saying, so what is it that you want help with? These are the constructs that we are providing you from the center. So there are some non-negotiables, which is we need to have a global corporate learning management system. We have to have it, because at the moment we don't know what somebody in France is doing versus somebody in Italy versus somebody in... And do we need to know? I don't. But there's a regulatory and compliance reporting that has to be done on an annual basis, so it will make that simpler. But that wasn't the focus. The focus was on, what are you trying to deliver at a business, and can we help you? I remember back to my time when I worked with HP, Lou Platt, who was the CEO of HP, said if only HP knew what HP knows. Yeah? And it's the same with Allianz. If only Allianz knew what Allianz knows.
You seem to have a crossed line somewhere.
So the microphone's outside, must be.
Oh, no, I think we should all stop and listen to our conversation.
So what have we done? We let them do whatever they want, but we gave them a construct which was, here's our community, what do you need? And now we find that Allianz Brazil are now working with Allianz Australia. Allianz Australia are working with Allianz China. China are working with Singapore. And so that came by just providing them the container, which is, we are a learning community, what can we do together?
Okay, so I like the idea. We're here to facilitate, and we put the structures in place, they get off and do the work. You said you had 6 people on the first call, and now you're regularly scheduling there's more engagement. Were they just waiting to be given the opportunity, or did you have to give them a push?
No, I think it was just create the opportunity.
Fantastic. Henrietta, we've got a question from Michael Randrup asking about the tools you were using. We don't tend to promote tools too much, but he was saying, did you rely on standard software with custom development on top, or was the whole thing built just for TUI from the ground up?
That's a really good,
It's a good question.
Yeah. The first project, using the artificial intelligence, we worked with the tool. It was still at its beta phase when we worked with it, so we were lucky that they agreed to push forward with us, but we just worked with the functionality. We did the whole thing in 6 weeks. We didn't have time to make any changes. The second project, when we thought we were lucky, we were interested in the concept of going forward with the chatbot, And at the same time, we came across a supplier that we knew and trusted that wanted to develop a chatbot. And so we worked in partnership, starting with a blank sheet of paper, so that they could create their chatbot to a genuine business need. And then at the end of that project, that chatbot then became a product that they owned and could sell on.
Right.
Yeah.
And actually, if you're working with a vendor, this is something which I've worked on the vendor side a lot. I still advise startups. Most organizations that are looking to do innovative things aren't going to take the risk without it being customer-led. But if they've got a good customer that they can rely on, have a good relationship with, you can get them to do a lot if they're then going to go and build it into the product later on.
Yeah.
And everybody wins. Fair enough?
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
100%.
Okay, personalization, another question from Michael. He says, Michael Randrup says, and this was actually only for the first two, but obviously, Henry, you're all about personalization as well. Should personalization extend to format? So you get a choice of video or written. Will it suggest video or written, for example? Also, this is me, should personalization, does it extend to the approach? Should we be looking at people and saying, yes, actually we think, or you can choose a didactic approach, or you can choose much more, discovery approach, for example. So just generally, how does personalization work in your system? So you're just building your system. Is there any personalization at all?
A little bit, but not too much.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah.
You've got enough to do at the
Yes,
moment.
exactly.
All right. Tony, you were talking about needing to get things set up on LinkedIn for your for your team, and people choosing things for themselves. That they were choosing body language. Now they're choosing other stuff. How much personalization are you permitting? Are you permitting it within some constraints?
No, it's totally open to whatever they want. I think what they look for is that trusted brand, the trusted advice.
Mm-hmm.
So if they see that Allianz is recommending to you in your feed, these are the recommended programs by Allianz, the employee is generally going to take them faster than if there's something that's not there. And we wrestled with, do we do that? Do we actually put that content in and suggest, or do we leave it completely open? And for the first 2 months, and you heard the result, was we left it completely open. After that, when we started seeding the platform and making those suggestions, we saw better traction, and the employees appreciated it more.
Right. Okay, so just giving people the keys to the library isn't enough.
Right.
Making suggestions prompts them to go in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Henry, personalization, you must be all about it.
Well, I think it's one of those things that we've been talking about, feels like forever, but not necessarily so far been as easy to achieve as our imaginations think it will be.
Yep.
So certainly with the solutions that we do, where we've got the time and the contents there, we'll give people an option. If you want to know about, I'll stick with an objective setting because I started with it. If you want to know about objective setting, do you want to read an article? Do you want to watch a video? Do you want to do some click next e-learning on it? And giving people that option. But I think it can go a lot further. And I hope that certainly over the next few years, it's one of those things that we'll see something really intelligent coming out that can really, ask the learner things like, what is your preferred way for this kind of training? And then it can make those recommendations. In fact, that may already be out there already, and I just don't know about it.
I think it's probably patchy. It's there in places. I do a survey every year. I ask people what's hot in learning and development, and for the past 4 years, personalization's been number 1 or number 2. Everyone wants it. Whether it's going to happen or not and how easily it will happen is another matter. Opinions and input. I made a note here when you were talking. When you're putting out a new system, it's really important, obviously, to get people's input, but can you have too much of a good thing? Let's go along. Helga, you did a great job of initially going out and saying what's working, what's not working, and you got some great responses. I just want to ask you, what actual technique did you use for that? Because did you use an online survey? Did you use a forum? Did you talk to people directly?
All of that, actually. We used multiple choices. So we had a task force, I would say a project team, interviewing the most engaged employees, really going to a questionnaire, asking them, so that you really get a bit more detailed, in-depth conversation that you don't have with standardized questions. So really get a feel, okay, what is it they're really doing because sometimes it's hard to explain why you are more engaged than other people. On the other side, yes, we had questionnaires, we had a webinar as well, and we had an open platform where people could write, hey, this is what really is a barrier for me to be more engaged, to do a better job. Can you please take this barrier away to make these processes less complex, because Agility is a lot about processes and complex structure. So can you take it away to make my life easier? Then I would be happy. And of course, then we asked the leaders as well, senior management, what do you think? And that came all together, and when we defined the first, we rated them, factor analysis, and said, okay, these are the key topics that we have to address to get the greatest impact then at the end on our engagement.
You talk about it very simply, but actually this is something which happens in far too few implementations of any learning technology, going out and talking to people.
The analysis, yes.
And I've seen lots of failed implementations. Well, actually, they're not failed implementations. The implementation is fine, but nobody uses it. And I've had people come to me again and again and say, Don, why is nobody using my system? And the answer is because you didn't ask them before you started what was going to happen, what was it useful for, and so on. And so the end result is you're trying to produce engagement too late in the day. Tony, but you can have too much engagement, you can over-Siemens-ize, or whatever the phrase you used was, a system, and you can make it different for everybody, and that's not a good thing. So where do you draw the line? How do you control people's expectations?
Not sure whether that's a fair question.
The problem is everyone always says, yes, but we're different here.
Yep.
And we need to have it our way. And there has to be a time, some point, where you say, well, actually, you can't, because we need to be able to control things centrally.
Yeah, I think that there's a core governance that you're trying to put in place, and we call them our functional rules, which govern how learning is managed from that sort of systems perspective. So these are the things that everybody will agree to. So when we drafted them as a group. So,
right.
So back to the first 6 people on the call, it then became the 200. Not everybody's included in that from the learning community, but there is now a quorum of people globally that now have come together and designed those global learning processes and have validated them locally. So this is how Mary in Stuttgart will actually access the systems that we use or the offerings that we have. So that's been validated at a local level. And the
okay, so I love that. You're going and asking, but what you're setting in place is a constitution for operation. This is our terms of reference that we'll work to.
Yes.
Brilliant. Henry, I'm going to ask you a different question. Again, kicked up in my mind from the conversation. I'm going to bring it back to Helga to wrap up with. It's the role of the manager. I've seen again and again that managers are crucial in the delivery of training and the effectiveness of learning. How's that handled at TUI? Because you talk as if it's all individuals doing their stuff, but we're not talking about the middle layer of management there at all.
I think they were 2 very different projects.
Yeah.
One was to the apprentices.
Yep.
Apprentices are obviously going through a fixed training requirement, and they're going to have a formal examination at the end of it, and the apprentices have fixed time set aside for training, and their managers have signed up to have an apprentice. So that's actually all quite fixed, and how we were going to get them to do the training was never an issue or never one of the big requirements. We just needed to make sure that they felt happy and comfortable and safe in that training environment. And the other audience were leaders, and so in their own way, in that instance, we were talking about people that were self-sufficient and making their own decisions. But I think the way that we tend to work is it's a very entrusting organisation, TUI. We expect people to feel empowered to be the best that they can be. So yes, you'll get very formal interventions when it's things like compliance, or if we've got a big change to our brand. For example, when we dropped the TUI brand and we dropped the Thompson brand and we brought TUI in the UK, then we need everybody to be buying into that message. And then it will be, you sell to the manager, this is the difference it's going to make to your team, this is the difference it's going to make to your business, and then they drive that completion down. But other than that, it's about making people feel empowered to make their own choices.
And if you have that culture in place, when the manager says you should learn this, presumably it's much easier then to get to the point where the person is engaged and feels comfortable doing
Well, it
it.
depends which country you're talking about.
Is that right?
It's a nightmare to get anyone in the UK to do anything.
Is that because we're all bloody minded? Why is that?
Well, oh gosh, on camera.
No, okay. We'll cut this out of the camera.
Be careful.
Let's just say that we often find they ask the question why much more often than other audiences.
So they're a challenging audience. Okay. I'm going to jump, because I want to wrap up with this point here. The role of the manager, and Helge, you said something fascinating I wasn't aware of, that at Hilti, it's a core part of their responsibility, developing people.
It's called Hilti Leadership. It's one PowerPoint slide. It's the world. On the left side, the only thing as a leader you have to do in Hilti is develop your people. So they should say, when they leave your team, what did I learn from my manager?
Wow.
Being humble about that, what did I learn? And on the other side is deliver outstanding results as a result out of this, right? Because if I develop my people, and it doesn't mean I have to develop them into another position, I can develop them on a daily basis, they will deliver outstanding results. So this is the Hilti leadership. These are the two things.
The development comes first.
Yes.
The delivery of results follows.
This is the
okay,
follow-up.
next time have one slide. And I want to see that slide, because it's an absolutely powerful slide. I think all organizations should be doing that. We've got 1 minute to go. I think it's time to wrap up. You've all got, I know, a fantastic summary of your advice to people about what they should be doing with learning and development. So, Helge, as we're talking, do you want to deliver your snappy piece of wisdom to the audience?
Well, I could say trust the force, but I will make it more towards L&D. What you focus on expands. So I'm really happy, as I was a performance coach before, that we focus on the strengths and talents of our people and not the weaknesses. And this is really fun and joy, and I love it.
What you focus on expands?
Yes.
I love that. Tony?
So the first thing I have to correct myself, because I said earlier on that we'd consumed 2.4 million hours of learning on LinkedIn Learning. It's not the 2.4 million hours, it's 2.4 million videos. Sorry, I had to do my fact check afterwards as well. So it's 2.4 million videos, and we have a completion rate of 2.2 million of those videos were completed, so started and completed. So I just have to, just
For the record.
in the interest. It's similar to what Helge said, which is you've got this concept of trust. Give the control to the employees, give it back, and trust them to do the right thing, because they will do the right thing.
Right.
I think our job in L&D is to get out the way, to make ourselves redundant and get out the way of people learning, rather than inhibit them with the systems and the structures and the tools that we give them.
Right.
Because we stifle learning rather than enable it in an organization.
It's a positive message. Henry?
Shout about ideas that you have that you want to implement, because people come in two camps. The people that love the idea and will tell you how to make it better, and the people that hate the idea and will tell you why it won't work. Both are great because they give you great feedback to make whatever you're doing even better.
Well, that's brilliant. So we've got to know that what we focus on expands, set ourselves free by letting go, and shout about our ideas. It's 3 great pieces of advice from your panel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, it's 1 o'clock. We are going into lunch, and we'll be back in all the sessions within, I don't know, when the lunchtime finishes, whenever that is. Thank you very much.